exist and thought would be fruitful or would be enjoyable to have are gone. So if you're going to prepare yourself for a career, which I imagine is what you're here at college to do, then you want to actually prepare yourself for a career that's actually going to exist, right? So the topic I really want to look at is not necessarily something about graduation, right? Or not even necessarily about here's the nuts and bolts about how you prepare yourself for graduating or, sending out that resume, or here's how to build a great LinkedIn profile, stuff like that, right? I want to instead focus on the big picture question of what jobs are going to exist in the future, what jobs are going to exist and cease to exist in our lifetime, and how entrepreneurship plays into all of that. I think entrepreneurship, both as a formal career, as in you own equity in a privately held company, and as a process of creative problem solving, is going to be the most important thing for the coming career space. So, yeah, usually when I give some version of this talk, I focus a lot on how you're going to need more than just your college degree when you graduate, which is true. I mean, there are more janitors in the United States today with chemistry degrees than there are chemists. There are more jobs requiring degrees that didn't require degrees before than you can possibly imagine. There are more jobs similarly that don't. But instead, other than that, I want to talk about how you can create a career for yourself and why you will need to be able to create that career for yourself going forward. So 25% of all jobs in the United States today are going to be automated by 2025. That's according to the Boston Consulting Group. I actually think that's a low number. I actually think that more jobs are going to be automated or displaced by 2025 than simply 25%. Because when we look at 25%, that's talking about pure automation, right? That's talking about jobs like lawyers. I'm going to talk a little bit about how I actually think if you are currently pre-law, you might want to reconsider because a lot of lawyers are going to be replaced by machines in our lifetime and currently are. That can be automated. That can be automated very easily. Secretaries, that can be automated. I think even teachers can be automated to a very large extent. But then there are other jobs that are displaced in different ways, right? So the trolley car operator was an automated job, right? You don't have that many trolley car operators anymore, and if you do, they're usually some kind of antique-y thing that you're in like San Francisco, and it's like, oh, this is cool. This person is a trolley car operator. But the horse and buggy driver was a job that was totally displaced by the automobile, right? So I think this number is actually going to be higher. I think this is very, very important for people who are starting to think about their careers, starting to think about entrepreneurship in the sense of what's the marketplace that I can serve, and are interested in entrepreneurship as creative problem solving. So 25% is probably a low number, but that's 1 in 4. So some of you are probably incredulous of what I'm saying. I know when I first came across these concepts, I was myself. Because if you go back historically, you should be incredulous of people who are trying to tell you, yeah, the future is going to be so totally different in our lifetimes. We're going to be walking on the sun. We're going to have colonies, inside people's organs and bonkers stuff like that, right? If you look back historically, people who make these claims, everyone know what this is? The Jetsons? Yeah. So this was a show in the 60s probably, that was about the year 2000, I think. There's a robotic maid and flying cars, and there's robot dog brought into the situation, right? It looks totally absurd. Similarly, if you go back a little bit after that, Back to the Future, I'm sure all you guys have seen on Facebook, when somebody shares around the meme, it's like, oh, today's the day that Marty McFly and Back to the Future 2 went to the future. Sometime in 2016 or sometime in 2015. Seems like we're never actually able to pin down when that is unless you actually go watch the movie. Or like the Ghostbusters. I think in Ghostbusters 2 they said that the world was going to end on Valentine's Day 2016. So we are thankfully still here. But you should be incredulous of people who are making claims that the future in your lifetime is going to be very, very different than what you see it now, right? Because they've been wrong before. I don't have a flying car. I don't have a robotic maid. I don't even have a Roomba. So the world does change, but it changes at a different pace and in different ways that we normally think of. And with it, the marketplaces that not only do we work in, but we as future entrepreneurs serve change. So we thought we would have flying cars by now. This is something I pulled from Jalopnik that's it's just something that somebody made and put up on the internet, right? We thought we'd have flying cars, and we thought we would have colonies on Mars by now. But what we got instead was this. So we thought we would be curing cancer, living forever, and living out this beautiful, wonderful life of prosperity and something from a Jetsons world. And instead we got Snapchat. And it's a big deal when Snapchat does something like this, right? And that's not to necessarily rag on something like Snapchat. I actually think that Snapchat is a really interesting business model. It's not just a stupid app where teenagers send nude photos of each other, of themselves to each other. Hopefully not of each other to themselves, but of themselves to each other. It's actually a really great broadcasting platform. If you guys have ever gone in, you've seen like Comedy Central's channel on there, Vice's channel, others like that. But that's a relatively new development. And that's still, we still don't have this, right? So where have we gone wrong? And why should you listen to me? Well, there has been a revolution happening in terms of technology, primarily in terms of information, that affects our careers and the careers of people that we want to serve in the marketplace monumentally. But it's something that very few people notice. It's something that happens very, very slowly. It's something that happens, year after year, decade after decade. Give you a couple examples. I think these are very important examples too. This is how people in certain parts of the world still today, but this is how people in coastal communities used to have to clean their clothing, if they even were lucky enough to clean it at all, right? It's called, I think it's called like rock slapping. So you would go out, you would rinse your clothing in water from the coastline or from the lake, and then you would smack your clothing when it's heavy against rocks to get out all the sand and get out all the dirt and everything else that you washed it with. That's pretty terrible. And this is a photograph. This is a photograph not from a third world country, right? So sometime in the 20th century, people were still regularly doing this. Then what happened? Well, you also get a sort of evolution along the way of certain tools that the marketplace creates, right? So rather than you having to slap your clothing against rocks, you can just rub it against, different things for laundry purposes, right? But that still takes a lot of time and a lot of energy, right? So you would have people who would devote their entire lives to being clothes washers, laundry washers, right? A laundry washer wasn't something you had in your basement or you had in your dorm room. It was a person's occupation. It was their job. It was one of the primary duties of a housewife. In fact, when I was trying to find photos for this, I searched the evolution of the laundry machine, because I think the laundry machine is just, there's so many lessons in it, right? There's lessons about the pace at which technology advances. There's lessons about the pace at which general wealth and prosperity within communities advances. Now mothers who were, spending most of their time washing clothing can read to their children, or they can take their children out, or they can, work to provide other opportunities to their families. Anyway, I searched for evolution of the laundry machine. And one of the things that popped up was a Bosch laundry machine ad. And it was from some Tumblr page that was, because there were people in each of the pictures. So it was like a picture of a laundry machine at different times in life. And there was a woman standing next to them. And it was this photo was so indignant that it was not a multi-gendered photograph of people standing next to laundry machines. I mean, I don't even know why you would need someone next to a laundry machine in the first place, but this is just a great example of how prosperity affects everybody, right? There's a phenomenal TED Talk, actually, by Hans Rosling called The Magical Laundry Machine, or Washing Machine, I think, where he talks about, he's a professor. He talks about the only reason he is a professor is because of the laundry machine. What does that mean, right? Not that he has like this weird fanatical obsession with laundry machines. He may, I don't know. But that the laundry machine saved and freed up time for his family, specifically for his mother to read to him. His mother was barely literate. His grandmother was totally illiterate. He's a professor. She would read to him when he was little, which inculcated in him a love of learning and a love of reading. This is something that is a massive improvement in 2 generations, right? The original picture was something from probably the early 1900s, happened regularly in American communities in the 1900s. Western, wealthy communities. And then it advances, you get the hand crank laundry machine, and then you get something like this. And it's been something related to this for probably the past 30 or 40 years. That's a big deal. Another example are taxis. Now, since most of you are from the Pittsburgh area, I mean, the taxi service here is terrible. If you're not from the Pittsburgh area, never take a taxi in Pittsburgh. They'll show up 45 minutes late and overcharge you. But taxis are a major part of the economy in most cities, right? New York City. You've seen pictures of New York City, or you've been to New York City. You see that it's just lined with taxis, right? Chicago, New York, LA, Boston, all these other cities. Major, major part of the service economy there. This is something that if somebody wanted to make their career out of just driving around and talking to people, leasing a car, they could have. Maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago. What happened to the taxi industry? It's outdone by an app. People who were formerly taxi drivers now either are forced to become Uber drivers or change their jobs. And I use the word force there very loosely. No one's actually forcing them at gunpoint to change their jobs. This is how the marketplace changes. This is how it evolves. This affects a lot more people than simply taxi drivers, right? So if you are an entrepreneur and you're thinking to yourself, okay, what's a large economy or market of people that I can serve, that I can create a product for? Let's say I have some familiarity with the transportation industry, right? You might invent something for taxi companies, or for taxi dispatchers, or for taxi drivers. Well, now your primary market has just shrunk substantially within a couple of years. Another example of a major innovation, maybe not on the size of flying cars, but a major innovation that saves up people's time and their energy. The other unseen picture of the unemployed taxi driver here, the other half of the picture is anybody can be an Uber driver, right? Anybody can be a Lyft driver. Is anyone unfamiliar with what Uber is? Okay, I just didn't want to go too far and somebody didn't know. I've given this, I've referenced Uber in talks before to substantially older audiences, and people look at me like, Uber? Like, I thought this was an English presentation. So what you'll find is people will lose their jobs, and for whatever reason, maybe they decide they want to quit their job, maybe they're laid off, they're furloughed. You can go become an Uber driver and set your own hours at any time. Uber drivers are themselves a form of an entrepreneur. What we've been able to open up with Uber and with a similar company, which I'll get into in a minute, is the opportunity for anybody who owns only their time and maybe one piece of capital, like a car, to become an entrepreneur. When before, you would either have to have massive social networks to raise the money necessary to fund the capital, to fund the entrepreneurial ventures, or you would just have to have them yourselves, right? Similarly, like I said, what we've been able to open up with the information revolution through the fact that I can be connected to anybody in the world and the resources they have at any minute with simply a $200 device in my pocket is a total upending of the hotel industry. And if you've only ever gone to like a Best Western or a La Quinta Inn and Suites, you might not understand that this is a major, major disruption. The hospitality industry is one of the largest industries in the world. And there are people who are currently enrolled at Cornell University in New York, an Ivy League university, enrolled at a hotel school for an industry that will probably, if not entirely collapse within our lifetimes, totally be reinvented within our lifetimes, right? That's what I'm talking about when I say you have to be aware of where the market trends are going when you're trying to plan your career. Because something like Airbnb comes along. Does anybody not know what Airbnb is? Okay, so Airbnb, for those who aren't familiar, in case there is anybody in here that didn't raise their hand, is a platform where if you own or rent an apartment, you can lease it out to someone for a short period of time, right? So I'm going to Arizona in 2 weeks. Rather than stay at a hotel or a spa or a resort, I just went on Airbnb, found a cabin in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains for $85 a night that some lady owns, and she lives, 2 acres away. She is not a hotel. She's not a bed and breakfast even. She just happens to own an extra bed, an extra room, an extra kitchen that she can lease out to somebody. I actually do this myself. When I moved back up here, I had a lease on a property in South Carolina that I could not break. So I subletted it to people through Airbnb. I would have lost thousands of dollars on that lease had I not had somebody come in and rent it from me. I am not, by any means, looking to be a hotel. I'm not even unemployed, like the hypothetical Uber driver I told you about. It's simply a way for more people who own resources to connect them to people who want access to those resources. So it's not simply stuff like Uber, Airbnb, Lyft, laundry machines, right? I give you 3 examples. Whoop-de-doo. There's a lot of examples in your daily life that you use that formerly were some other kind of product. And the people who were connected to that product probably had to totally change careers. So let's see if this works. You don't need sound. Oh, it works too though. So this is a desk in 1980, the evolution of it until 2014. Products, stapler, an encyclopedia, corkboard, photo albums, and everything attached to those industries has either have to totally change to adapt to the information revolution, the internet, or it has totally gone away entirely. So one of the things that I think is most fascinating in here, in this, I've originally seen it as a GIF, but the video is, did you notice what the Uber app came from? Did anybody notice that? It's hard to tell when it's up here, but the Uber app on the person's computer came from a set of car keys. So you are finding people today living in major American cities who are choosing not to own a car because they can Uber around. That's a big change in the marketplace. That's a big change in the habits of young people. That's a big change in the auto industry. You're actually finding, as an extension of that, Uber is actually, it's great that we're here in Pittsburgh, because Uber is actually building a robotic car facility here in Pittsburgh, right? They actually came under the darkness of night and poached all these professors from Carnegie Mellon, these robotics professors, to help them build robotic cars. So even the Uber driver as a job in 10, 15 years is not going to be around. The idea of owning a car and everything that's associated with car ownership is going to change. Car ownership in major American cities is going to be a thing of the past. One of the highest margin industries you can go into in the past 20 or 30 years is parking lot ownership, right? And this makes sense, right? All you need to do is buy a plot of land, put asphalt on it, and pay somebody $7.25 an hour to make sure that nobody gets their car broken into or steals spots on the lot, right? It's a very high margin industry, very low overhead. I would not want to be a parking lot landlord right now, because people are going to own fewer cars in the future. Similarly, if I was selling goods at AutoZone, right, to the normal car consumer, I would not want to be in that industry right now either, because that marketplace is changing and is about to change monumentally. So when we look at these things, the thought running through a lot of your heads is probably something like, okay, but those are labor jobs, right? Like, I'm not going to be a laundry machine washer or a dishwasher. I'm not going to be a taxi driver. I'm not going to be a hotel clerk or maid, right? That's why we're here getting a college degree, right? So we don't do that. Has anyone ever seen the poster that says, work smart, not hard? It shows a guy covered in grime and dirt, and he's holding like a sledgehammer or something. He looks sad. He's looking down. He's on one side. He's in a steel mill or something. And then on the other side is a guy standing with his high school diploma or his college degree and his cap, and he's smiling, and the future is ahead of him. I really hate that poster. And if any of you know Mike Rowe talks about this poster a lot because it was in his guidance counseling office when he was in high school. He's the host from Dirty Jobs. I hate that poster because it implies to us that working smart and hard are two different things, that there's that dichotomy. And two, that if you work smart, if you work in a sort of like white-collar industry, you're going to be insulated from a lot of the things that come to blue-collar industries, which, as a matter of fact, you will not be. So, like I mentioned a couple things at the beginning of the talk. Secretaries, lawyers, I would even throw in music composers. Not that music composers is a huge industry, but that's something that you would never imagine could be replaced simply by a machine, right? All these other things associated with that. Just a couple examples here. X.AI. I actually use this service myself. I don't have a secretary. I don't have a personal assistant. I have a artificial intelligence program that does all of that for me. So someone emails me, says, hey, Zach, I'd love to set up a coffee appointment to talk about Praxis with you. Do you have any availability next Wednesday or Thursday? I reply to them. I CC Amy.ai on the email and say, hey, John, Amy will help you find a time. Amy is not actually a person. Amy does not exist. Amy is a program. But Amy will reply under the name Amy Ingram to anybody who's emailing me and say, hi, John, Zach is available at 2 p.m. on Tuesday and 4 p.m. on Thursday. Where would you like to meet? I've actually been duped by this service myself. I came across it because I was trying to set up an appointment with a business partner who ended up CCing Amy on an email, and I thought, oh, that's really nice. He's got a great assistant. And I ended up looking at the signature of Amy, and I found out that Amy is just a bunch of code in ether somewhere in New York City, right? So that's a whole subset of jobs there. Personal assistants, secretaries, etc., who can easily be replaced and are being replaced right now. And Amy, as a program, is getting smarter every day. So let's say I want to say that anytime I'm getting coffee with somebody, it's going to be at 21st Street Coffee and Tea in the Strip District in Pittsburgh. All I would have to do is email Amy as if I were emailing a real person and just say, Amy, anytime someone wants to set a coffee appointment with me, it's here. And the program would remember that. This is something that we call conversational commerce. Conversational commerce is something that is really coming into the fore now because a lot of the code libraries, a lot of the language libraries, a lot of the linguistics understanding that we need to make something like this work intelligently, and occasionally Amy's stupid, but probably not any more stupid than an actual human being, right? We're just now developing those libraries. We're just now developing that code. We're just now getting to the point where we can scrape that information across the internet, across people's emails, across people's conversations, and understand what, if somebody puts a comma here rather than a comma here, why that makes a big difference for scheduling an appointment. Does anyone know what this is? Nobody? It's Mario, but it's a program associated with Mario called Mario Maker. Mario Maker is something that my colleague Isaac, he's got a young son who's like 11. His son loves, Minecraft and Mario and all these other games. And so he originally was going to learn code so that he could build mods for these games. And this is what historically he would have had to have done, right? But because of things like Mario Maker, which are programs that essentially just allow you to build your own mods without even knowing any coding language, allowed you to build your own platforms, allowed you to build your own levels in video games, he doesn't have to do that. He might still have to do a little bit with, say, Minecraft, because it's relatively, when it comes to the user interface, is relatively dumb compared to Mario. But we actually see this in a lot of other areas associated with software engineering, right? A lot of you have probably heard people tell you, go into STEM. Don't major in, underwater baskets weaving studies, major in STEM. And to a certain extent, yeah, you shouldn't major in underwater basket weaving studies, but just majoring in STEM is not necessarily going to save you from the oncoming information revolution that we're experiencing. Because there are people who before would have been paid money, maybe not to design Super Mario levels, right? but to design websites for people, but to design apps for people, but to design back-end platforms for software service companies that are being replaced by platforms that are essentially just drag and drop, but much smarter than, say, Super Mario Maker. Weebly is a great example of this. Weebly is something like WordPress, allows you to build your own blog. You can just build your blog by dragging and dropping. Before, you would have had to have learned HTML, you would have had to have learned CSS, PHP. You would have had to have hired somebody whose entire job was just to know that stuff and build a simple blog for you. Now, you go onto Weebly.com and you can build it yourself. So, software engineers are already being replaced. And I would bet you money, I bet anybody in this room money, that a lot of software, mechanical, and chemical engineers will be replaced by some form of machine learning or AI within the next 30 years. Because at a lot of companies, the role of the engineer is simply to find bugs and work out those bugs in the platform. Apple's platform for developing apps for iOS is evolving constantly to show you where the problems are in your code and how you can fix those problems. At a certain point, it's going to be able to self-fix. This is something called ROS. I mentioned before that I think law will similarly be replaced by this. Anybody in here pre-law? Planning on going to law school? Good, good. The world doesn't need many more lawyers. But a lot of lawyers today, especially corporate lawyers, their primary job is to just find citations and justify questions, right? With this is also conversational commerce. You sign up for ROS, and you can send it a question, a text message, an email, phone call, whatever, and ask it a question that you might ask a colleague of yours who might be your corporate attorney for citations on a case, and it will pull those for you. It is replacing something that normally people spend 12 years of public school education, 4 years of undergrad, and then 3 years of law school to do, with a service that is maybe a couple $100 a month. This is massive, and there's a huge incentive here for anybody who's interested in conversational commerce, because so much money is blown in the black hole that is legal fees every year, that if you could replace law almost entirely, you're probably not going to replace attorneys in the courtroom, right? But that's only 10, 15% of what most attorneys do, or what most lawyers do. There's a huge incentive here. Somebody who could unlock this could become a billionaire easily. And Melomics is a platform that will compose music based on what people like. We are getting to a point in our understanding of harmonics, melodies, chord progression, rhythm, that we know what is more and less aesthetically pleasing to different people, right? You can look at my Spotify playlist, and you could probably plug it into something like Melomics and design an app or design a song that is entirely new that I would like. This is something before that we would have thought only human beings could do. But when we actually break it down, we find that a lot of human beings who are successful composers are actually just mimicking former composers. When we actually really break it down and go back to the classical era or to the Baroque era, we find that it's actually extremely formulaic. Bach's music is based on formulae. Haydn's music, similarly. And everything from that is just an extension of those. So there's a lot more that's an extension of that. Doctors. IBM's Watson is now diagnosing people for their diseases, right? And it's doing a 50% better job than actual doctors, right? Pharmacists. Pharmacists can easily be replaced by a combination of robotics and AI, because it's primarily a job of trying to measure things out and making sure that they're going in the right places. These are two white-collar, highly credentialed industries that are being disrupted by the information revolution. So, is this bad, right? I make it sound like it's a nightmare, right? If you're a doctor right now, you might as well as go become, you might as well just go become a hobo, because you're practically going to be one anyway, and at least you won't have all this student loan debt, right? It's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Unless you are actually building a career to be a taxi driver, this is a pretty good thing. This kind of disruption, this kind of evolution of technology is something that makes us all better off. Because I can go on my iPhone and I have access to all these services, I am wealthier than John D. Rockefeller was at the turn of the American century. Sure, Rockefeller might have been able to afford a much larger house than I was, or he might have been able to afford a boat, but as far as like normal conveniences go, like hot water every morning and access to easy, cheap transportation and easy, cheap food, I can go on my phone right now and I can get food delivered to me without me even having to pull out my wallet. Food that John D. Rockefeller would have never tasted in his lifetime. This is what the creation of value is. So there are two actors that I've kind of been talking about here the whole time. There's the people who are affected as consumers, right? So we can save time by not having to wash our clothing in the stream every day, right? And then our parents can read to us, and then we can become literate, and we can go become professors. And then there's the people who had the jobs before that they don't have those jobs now. There's a third group that I've been leaving out so far that's been running a lot of this. This third group sits at the top of this pyramid. For those of you who can't make the pyramid out, at the very bottom of the pyramid is unskilled physical labor. I'm not trying to make a value judgment here. I'm not saying that if you are skilled physical labor, that people in unskilled physical labor are somehow beneath you. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is this is the pyramid of job automation and displacement. Jobs at the very, very bottom are unskilled physical labor. Imagine people who before would have been working in coal mines, who now can be totally replaced by machines in those coal mines that just do the very basic drilling, right? Unskilled non-physical labor is something that I would consider like working at McDonald's, right? Most people who work at McDonald's and service industry are going to be replaced in the next couple of years. I mean, who here has been to Sheetz, right? So you know that there are those platforms of Sheetz that allow you to order without even ever having to talk to anybody at all, right? You just have to talk to the cashier. You don't have to have anybody take your order. The evolution of that, especially as the minimum wage continues to increase and increases fixed costs for franchises, is that you can pay at the kiosk and that your food will be created and served by machines. That's something that's currently in production across the world. Skilled physical labor probably falls above that. Skilled physical labor includes something that it could be working on oil rigs, it could be working you could be a performer in a symphony. I think a performer in a symphony, unless they are actually composing the music, is skilled physical labor. If any of you are musicians, you know exactly what I'm talking about. A lot of it's muscle memory, a lot of it's breathing patterns, those kinds of things. Again, we've already replaced a lot of this by GarageBand is a great example. You can just use your synth on your computer to create music that all you would have to do is compose it. Skilled non-physical labor is towards the top. It's a bit harder to replace because it requires analytic ability. It requires creative ability. Lawyers, doctors, people like that fall up here. And then finally, creative labor is at the very, very top. The people who are driving these revolutions that I've been talking about sit at the very top of this pyramid. They are the entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurship is creative labor. So if we look at where we sit right now along a timeline, if you can imagine this being a timeline over here, we're probably somewhere between skilled physical labor and skilled non-physical labor as far as automation goes. We have things like Airbnb, Uber, Ross, Duolingo, NoWait, IBM's Watson, Wealthfront. Wealthfront's a platform that replaces stockbrokers and financial advisors, all run by computers, right? And we're going to keep moving up that ladder into skilled non-physical labor. So the people who sit at the very top of that, and if you turned out here, you're probably wondering why I haven't mentioned too much on entrepreneurship, are the entrepreneurs. These are the people who are the creative problem solvers. A lot of them at one time in their lives or another sat somewhere else on the pyramid, right? So Uber's founder, Travis Kalanick, is actually a software engineer, so he falls in skilled non-physical labor, right? Other people, you'll find that they were maybe taxi drivers at one point in their lives, and they've moved up on the pyramid, creating something else. Or it doesn't matter, but they've moved up to different places in the pyramid where they can actually move that labor along. So entrepreneurship is the act of creative problem solving. It's the act of thinking horizontally and vertically at once, of thinking, oh, I see something here that's a great opportunity. I see all these taxi cabs. They're terrible, they're slow, they're dirty, the taxi drivers are mean, they overcharge you. And I have a cell phone here that allows me to get in touch with anybody. I also see all these cars sitting around that are empty. I wonder if I can match those cars up with people who are willing to drive them and people who are willing to get into those cars with other people. Or I see all these homes that are empty, and I see all these people blowing a ton of money on bad hotels. I wonder if I can match those people up with those empty homes. Or I see all these people who really want to learn a language, but they don't want to go back to school. Or their teachers at school aren't particularly good. And I have all these people who also know linguistics very, very well and how to teach languages and how people learn languages. I wonder if I can create something like Duolingo, right? The entrepreneurs are the people moving this process along the entire time. So they're the ones sitting at the top of the pyramid. The question becomes, how do you become an entrepreneur, and what does this actually mean to anybody who's interested in entrepreneurship? If any of you have taken entrepreneurship classes or sat in on them, or if anybody in here is an instructor and has taught them, you know that entrepreneurship classes can only do so much. School around entrepreneurship is almost an oxymoron, because entrepreneurship is the process of creative problem solving in the marketplace. School is entirely removed from the marketplace. If you don't get a good grade on an exam, that doesn't mean that you're going to lose customers, right? If you fail class, it doesn't mean you're going to lose customers. If your professor has a bunch of students who fail, especially if they're tenured, they're probably not going to lose their job, even if they're a terrible instructor, right? It's an entirely different place in the marketplace. What you need is you need some sort of opportunity to engage in this creative problem solving, to engage in this process of horizontal and vertical thinking. And that's really hard to come by. And that's really hard to create yourself, especially when you are trying to essentially build this insurance policy that is, say, like a bachelor's degree or a JD or an MD as the marketplace changes. So for my experience, and from the experience of my colleagues at Praxis, what we came across was this huge gap in this marketplace, right? You have all these young people who are interested in becoming entrepreneurs or in entrepreneurial thinking, or at least understanding how the marketplace changes. And you have all these companies, these entrepreneurs, these founders, these innovators, who want to give people that opportunity, but they can't find anybody that they trust. My colleague Isaac, who's our CEO, when he founded Praxis, the story he would tell is that he ran these two groups of people, and he eventually asked the entrepreneurs, the business owners, why aren't you hiring? You know, it was the height of the financial crisis, so he figured it had something to do with the recession. But they would tell him, we are hiring. We just can't find people with the right skills and the right kinds of experiences to make it worthwhile for us to hire. So for us, what we ended up doing was we launched Praxis for that reason. What we wanted to do was equip people with the cognitive tool set, the physical tool set, and the experiential tool set for them to go and become entrepreneurs. If you got excited about the stuff I was talking about here, if it didn't scare you and it got you excited about how the marketplace is changing and all these new opportunities that open up, then you're somebody who probably feels underserved by the current human capital marketplace that you're in, right? You probably think to yourself, I want to run a company someday, but I don't know how this is getting me there faster than if I just went and worked. So we built Praxis for that reason. Similarly, as I was saying earlier, horizontal and vertical thinking. If there's one thing you take from this talk, it's horizontal and vertical thinking. That horizontal thinking is, okay, I see all these resources here in the marketplace that I'm currently in or have experience in, right? Again, if I'm a software engineer, then I see all these people who have these coding abilities and have all these infrastructural abilities that I can then build out. Horizontal thinking is, okay, I look out into the world and I see all these other opportunities that I can connect with the resources that I have now. For us with Praxis, what it was we have young people who are interested in building more with their lives, and building a career that they love, and potentially becoming an entrepreneur themselves someday. So those are some of the people in our network. And then the other people are business owners and entrepreneurs who are telling us, we just want people who have great work ethic, can learn quickly, and are excited about coming to work at our companies. Those are two opportunities right there. And then the horizontal thinking for us is, okay, we look into the broader picture of the human capital marketplace for young people, right? If you're between 18 and 25 and you're reasonably intelligent, what you do is you immediately go to college. But a lot of people are being underserved by that opportunity. So what we do is we connect them to more opportunities. For us, what that is going to work, essentially apprentice at a startup. We take 18, 25-year-olds, we place them at startups where they work for a year, work with entrepreneurs, they get that experience, they see how the marketplace is actually created, how it's actually served, how value is created, and then they go out and they can launch their own companies, they can join other companies in our business network, whatever they want. They're equipped for actually jumping into the marketplace. And some of the people who come to our program are college grads, some of them skip college entirely. The important thing is that when they come in, they actually have the opportunity to build value, build and create value. So the way I like to look at it is, you have a lot of people out there, many of you are in this room today, many of them aren't, who will say, I've got self-motivation, I've got courage, I'm curious, I'm talented, I could be passionate about something that I can really throw myself into. I spoke to a student like this the other day who was telling me, yeah, you know, I'm learning statistics in college, but my major ends after a second semester of my sophomore year, so I'm just going to be blowing $100,000 over the next 2 years. But he's curious, and he's courageous. He's like, I'll go work anywhere. It just gives me the opportunity to put those skills to use. What we do is we can then connect those people with those opportunities. So the example I like to give is James. James, despite looking like he's 13, is actually 19. He came to our program right out of high school. We placed him at a company called BitPay. Does anybody know what Bitcoin is? Okay, a lot of people know what Bitcoin is. Does anybody not know what Bitcoin is? Okay, handful of people. So Bitcoin is a peer-to-peer anonymous decentralized currency, right? It is built on the blockchain, which is a decentralized ledger that in just very, very loose, simple terms means it's essentially a ledger that I can record my transactions in that's not held in any one central place. So that opens up a lot of opportunities for people, for contract law, for purchasing things, for engaging in the marketplace in different ways. It's a very simple rundown of how that works. BitPay is a Bitcoin processor. So if you want to be paid $1,000 in Bitcoin every month, I would pay BitPay $1,000. They would change it to $1,000 in Bitcoin and give it to you, right? Or vice versa. When James was in the program, he paid his administrative fees to the program in Bitcoin. So we would send him an invoice. It'd be in US dollars. He paid it in Bitcoin. We get it in US dollars. He, 19 years old right now. He's running their marketing department. Came into the program with essentially no skills besides the fact that he was excited about entrepreneurship. He was excited about building a career that he loved and is a good hard worker with great writing skills. Again, he's doing something that most people don't get the opportunity to do by the time that they're 30. So that's what I'm talking about when I say horizontal and vertical thinking. We have connected him to an opportunity that is vertically outside of the place that he would normally be in life. But he's taken the resources that he has horizontally and connected those with us. So I covered a lot of things in my talk here, and the overarching theme is that the marketplace is very quickly moving. It is very quickly changing. And it's something that if you are a young person today, which everybody in this room is, and you actually want to be in control of your career and not be one of these people who is actually at the mercy of market forces, you have to engage in this process of creative problem solving. You have to be aware of how that market is changing and those opportunities that you can create yourself. You have to use a combination of horizontal and vertical thinking. Look at the resources that are in your network today. I would bet you that they're actually much greater than you think they are. I hear people all the time who tell me, yeah, you know, but I'm just a 20-year-old, 19-year-old. What kind of resources do I have? Well, one, you probably don't have a mortgage. You probably don't have a family, at least kids that are reliant on you. And you probably don't have a ton of debt. So the one resource you have a ton of that anybody who's a couple years older than you doesn't have is opportunity. You can take a low-paying job for a short period of time. You can engage in these opportunities that if you had other people relying on you, would be much harder for you to engage in. So with all that being said, I have some contact information up here. I'm local. I'm happy to engage in any discussions, questions for the next, like 12 minutes or so that we have. Oh, we have a half hour? Excellent. Perfect. I was thinking it went to 1:15. But discussion's really fun on this topic. I mean, really anything that we've talked about here, I'm happy to talk about. So I'll tell you a little bit about what I do with my job, right? because I think that this is actually an interesting opportunity for you. Business development director at any company means one of two things. It means some form of sales, or it means we have no idea what this person actually does, so we're just going to give them that title. I'm a combination of both. So what I do with most of my time is I engage the companies that are in our business partner network, and I place the people who are in our program at those companies. Or I bring new companies into that business partner network. So for me, that provides me with the opportunity to engage with really interesting entrepreneurs, people who are actually out there engaging in the process of creative problem solving and creating value. I have brought in a year about 150 business partners into our network. That looks like a couple of things for me. That means going out, say if I'm doing it in another city, I'll go out, schedule a trip to Austin, Texas. We have a lot of business partners in Austin. I will then go into Austin's fastest growing companies lists. I will go into the Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies list for companies in Austin, and I will look at my social and professional network that I have in the Austin area. And I will ask for introductions for people at interesting growing companies, because what I provide for them, again, going back to the process of creative problem solving, is I provide a human resources solution for them. They're growing quickly. They need new talent. For me to offer them, here's someone who's very excited about coming to work for you. They might not have a ton of skills right now, but give them an opportunity, give them 10 months, and at the end of that 10 months, if you want to hire them, you go right ahead. You want to hire them full-time? Awesome. I provide a solution to a problem for them. That provides me with a really cool opportunity. I get to meet with a lot of entrepreneurs and not only hear their stories, but hear their pain points, hear what their hiring processes are like, hear what they think their marketplace is changing into. So one of the things I've run into a lot is, going back to the credential argument, the idea about the college degree or the JD or the MD, you'll find a lot of job postings will say that some sort of credential is required, right? But an increasing number of those say something like 4-year degree or equivalent work experience required. And an increasing number of those job postings similarly actually have no bachelor's degree requirement at all, including about 10 of the fastest growing companies in Pittsburgh that I've come across so far. And I haven't even gotten down through the first 30 in the list. They'll just say, we want someone who might have a little bit of experience, we want somebody who is proficient in these areas, and that's it. The companies that do have the degree, what a lot of these entrepreneurs tell me is it's essentially a blunt tool, right? They are imagining in their mind's eye, this is the job candidate I want for this job. What do they have? Well, they probably have X number of years of experience in this field. They probably have some sort of competency with A, B, and C platforms. And somebody who is in that circle to really hone in on that circle probably has a college degree too, right? So the degree is totally an afterthought. If you know anybody who is primarily running on their major or their degree for getting a job when they graduate, that person is in for a rude awakening. Who knows someone who chose their major based on the median career returnings for somebody in that major, right? Yeah, I knew a lot of people. I knew people who chose the colleges they went to based on that, right? The thing with those is a couple things. One, if you're a petroleum engineer and you're working in poetry, you're probably not making $125,000 a year, right? If you're a petroleum engineer major who's working in petroleum engineering, you're probably going to make that money. So there's a selection bias there. The other thing to keep in mind is people who are finance majors, especially from coastal universities, overwhelmingly move to cities like New York, Boston, San Francisco. They have much higher costs of living, right? So for somebody to ride totally on the major, what their courses are, what they've studied, really sets themselves up for failure when they're going out onto that marketplace. The primary things you should be looking for are experience and tangible, deliverable skills. What I mean by that I'm not saying go become a welder. If you do want to become a welder, go do it. I hear it's got great pay. But what I'm saying is, if you claim that you know, say, quantitative analysis, and you want to go work at a hedge fund, have some sort of way of showing off that you actually know that. An employer doesn't just want to see a line on a resume saying, great quantitative analysis skills. They'll tell you, so what? Tell me, prove it to me, right? That's something that I've run into quite a bit. Yes?
So if you are able to place talent, how do you know that they're talented enough to fulfill your position?
Yeah. So we have our own application process that we put people through. It's a combination of a traditional academic admissions process and an HR process, we look at a couple of things. One being, one of the things I really like that we do for our candidates is we ask them to submit a video interview that's 3 minutes long, and it has to be at a private link on YouTube, and they set their own deadline for that. If somebody can't even set their own deadline and meet it, they're not going to be a good candidate for the program, right? If somebody can't respond quickly and professionally to our emails, we give everybody 48 hours, which is 24 hours too much in my mind, to respond to our emails. Then if they take more than that time, they're out. Most of the people, we accept about 15% of the people who end up applying to our program. Most of the people get rejected at 2 phases in that process. One is immediately after we request more information from them and they take forever to get back to us. If, again, more than 48 hours, they're out. I'm not going to introduce someone to a busy entrepreneur, a busy business person, and they take 3 days to email that person back. If you're an 18, 19, 22-year-old who's excited about this, you better be hawking your phone. The other thing is after they interview with me. So they interview with our staff team, our academic staff team. Our academic staff are looking at, can this person do the academic side of our program? So we do some philosophy, some history, some economics. The way I like to describe that is an intellectual or professional accelerator. So we help people identify their 3-year goals and meet them in 1 year. They have a one-on-one Praxis advisor. Our academic team are our Praxis advisors. And then if they like them, they then pass them on to me. And what I'm looking for when I interview a candidate is, do I think this person would be up to snuff at a business partner? And would I be willing and proud to put the company brand on this person and put them in front of a business partner? If the answer isn't hell yes to both of those, even if it's just a warm yes, the answer is no. So that process takes about a month if someone responds along the timeline that we want them to respond along. Yes?
What made you say this is what I want to do, and what kind of got you involved?
Yeah, this is fun. So I was a second semester freshman at the University of Pennsylvania, and I was super antsy. I was unhappy. I was doing well with my tests, doing well with my grades, doing well in school. I even got research fellowship that paid very well that summer. But I wanted to create something, right? I wanted to go out and create value. I wanted to be in the process, in the trenches of actually building something that people can feel and experience. So I went to my colleague Isaac, who I actually met in high school. I met him at a summer seminar I went to when I was a junior, and he's 32. And I told him, I was in his focus group for Praxis originally. I told him, let me just come do some work for you for free. You don't even need to pay me. Just I'll work after school and I'll work on the weekends. And I did a little bit of everything with that. I was doing a little bit of building out our MailChimp list, building out our digital presence, doing some of our content marketing, building the back end of our platform. It was actually looking at our education program. I was enrolled at this big fancy private Ivy League university, and here this little startup had a better education program than what I was paying a ton of money for. That's what really, really disillusioned me. So after that year of doing that kind of work, I eventually did get paid. I took a year off from school because I knew I could either do this really well and not do school, or I could do school really well and not do this. But if I tried to do both, it'd be mediocre. So I took that year, built out the program even further, eventually moved into the business development role I'm in right now, and I dropped out after about a year because I was achieving everything I had wanted to achieve in maybe a year that I thought was going to take me several years. So for me, it was antsiness, right? And that's actually, I've interviewed a number of candidates for the program recently who I just think this is a good trait because I've noticed it with people who have been successful at the program in the past, and maybe it's a little bit of bias for my own personal trait, but somebody who is really antsy in school, especially after going out into the workforce and getting some experience at a startup or a nonprofit or something, is the kind of person that we really get excited about. And I was that kind of person. I had a little bit of a taste of what it was like to create value and build something, and I was hooked. So for me, I built something that I think I would have wanted to experience, right? That's another common trait that you find with a lot of the things I cited, is that a lot of successful companies, and I'm not trying to say that we're successful, we're only a couple years in, but a lot of very successful companies are built by people who need the program or software or product that they built, right? Did that answer your question? Mm-hmm. Yes.
Can you please tell us more about that 1-year program?
Yeah, absolutely. So for Praxis, once somebody is accepted to the program, like I said, it's a 1-year program. They do 10 months at a company, right? They do 12 months in the program overall, but 10 months at a company. The first 2 months, they're working with their Praxis advisor. So the Praxis advisor is like a one-on-one coach. The way I like to describe it is, like I said, I like to describe it as a personal accelerator. If anybody's familiar with startup accelerators, what they do is a startup comes in, they give them mentoring, they give them resources, they help them reach their 3-year goals in 1 year, right? That's the way I like to think about it for individuals, right? We help you reach your 3-year goals in 1 year. We help you reach your 5-year goals in 2 years or 3 years. The way I like to describe the Praxis advisor is you have a fitness coach to help you get in better physical shape. You have a Praxis advisor to help you get in better intellectual and professional shape, right? This is a person who is going to help you stay accountable to your goals, is going to help you figure out how you actually reach those goals. A lot of people have great goals, but they just don't know how to get there, right? So we have the resources in our network, whether through the faculty that we have in our faculty network, the business partners, the investors, the intellectuals, all these other people, or it's through our alumni network, that we then connect people with these resources. So give you an example of us doing this very actively. I have a participant that we've accepted to the program who is starting as business partner in April, and he really, really wants to work at a hedge fund. And he's got great financial analysis abilities on the qualitative side, so he make a great financial advisor, but he really lacks a lot of quantitative skills, right? Like understanding the econometrics of working in a hedge fund. So we are building a 30-day crash course quantitative analysis module for him with a professor in our network who used to work at a couple of hedge funds, right? So the participant works on that education experience throughout the entire program. Some months, it's a 30, they work on 30-day professional development projects, PDPs. And these 30-day PDPs change every month, obviously. So 1 month, they might have to do with what the person's doing in that business partner experience. So let's say they're doing sales at a software as a service company, and they've never done sales before in their life. So they're going to work with their Praxis advisor to go through a sales crash course for that month. And the thing that we really emphasize is whether you have a college degree or not, about a third of our participants do have college degrees. What we emphasize is showing off what you know, like I just said a couple minutes ago, right? It's one thing to say you know something, but it's another thing to have this verified by some sort of third party. We have all of our participants build an online portfolio of their own, for example. We teach them a little bit of PHP and they build it on WordPress. Then as they go through the program, they're working on deliverables for every PDP every month. So if they're working on the business partner PDP for a month, say sales, they're going to work on maybe a sales deck that they put together, and they're going to put that up online, available for people to see, right? Maybe through SlideShare, maybe on their portfolio site. If they're working on one of our intellectual development modules, they might be reading philosophy that month, or engaging in history or economics. Then they're going to write about that once a day for the entire month. This really helps them get their writing skills up to snuff. Really helps them get their public speaking skills. We encourage all of our participants to engage in public speaking a couple times. And it also helps them build a larger profile. We actually have a participant here in Pittsburgh. His name's Nick Tucker. Nick is 19 years old as well, like James. And he moved to Pittsburgh from Auburn, Alabama, to work at a holdings company over in Crafton. Nick, 1 month, wrote an article about his shady life as an underage drinker and about everything that's involved in being an underage drinker, getting your ID taken away, all the binge drinking that happens because people can't go out and legally actually buy the alcohol themselves, all these other things, right? He ended up putting that up on a website that we have connections to. It got picked up by Vox.com, which is the 1,000th most trafficked website in the world, and he got a couple interviews out of that on like iHeartRadio and a couple other platforms. So those are the kinds of things that we really push our participants for them to do, and we provide them the opportunities to do as well. While they're working that business partner, they're not doing an internship, right? It's not, getting coffee, making copies for someone sitting in a cubicle. They're actually out there engaging in real value. And the real value that we add for our business partners is that these companies, for them to find people like what we bring to them is really, really hard. So to go back to my story, one of the things that was really weird to me at Penn, I'm looking at you because you asked about my story, but this is about the whole program experience as well. One of the real things that was really, really weird for me at Penn was that Goldman Sachs would come in twice a year and do a one-day recruiting event. That recruiting event cost them $600,000 for 1 day. That makes sense for Goldman Sachs. It's this massive investment bank. if they get 10 candidates that they're paying $65,000 a year right out of school into Manhattan, then that event is rational for them to do, right? For most of our business partners, these are successful companies, but if they spent $600,000 in one day, they'd either be bankrupt or their investors would fire them. So they have this serious HR process where HR problem where they want to find good, talented people, but they don't have the time or the resources to do that. So we make them guarantee to us that the participant is going to have a quality experience while working there. So like James, when he was at BitPay, he was in their marketing department. One of the projects he did was he redrafted all the copy on all of their material. So if you have your phone or your computer out, you go to bitpay.com. Everything on bitpay.com was written by James Wapple. That's a very substantive project, especially to trust someone who is 18 years old at the time to do. So we really emphasize the quality of the experience. I spend maybe 10, 20% of my time doing quality control of the business partner experience. If a participant ever tells me the business partner had them go get their dry cleaning, for example, we would never partner with that company again. We've never had that issue, but we take that very seriously. Yes?
How hard is it for a company to be a business partner?
What I look for is I look for a company that is growing. I look for a company that can offer a participant a quality experience, meaning that, again, they're not going to be doing primarily administrative tasks. And I look for either an involved founder or owner of some kind who is interested in having that participant there. We do have some slightly older companies where the founders actually aren't involved anymore, but most of our companies are younger than 5 years old. The company here that Nick Tucker's at in Crafton is it's a number of companies. It's under a holdings company. So the holdings company is only a couple years old, but some of the companies that are there are 20, 30 years old. So one of them is Allegheny Crane Rental, right? Allegheny Crane Rental has been around for 20 years. But the business partner that Nick is working with bought it 10, 15 years ago. And he's still actively involved in the company, actively buying up new assets all the time. So Nick actually works at the holdings company there. But yeah, I also spend part of my time doing quality control before we place anybody as a business partner. Ideally, the people who come to Praxis are just excited about working at an interesting company, and interesting just means the opportunity to actually create value. Occasionally, I do get people like the participant I mentioned a couple minutes ago who really, really, really wants to work at a hedge fund. So in his case, I will go out and specifically find a hedge fund. Hope that helps. Yes, Red.
So part of the reason, like you said, Uber got into that industry is because there was a problem with the taxi industry.
Mhm.
Is that part of Praxis is why you guys started it? Because you look at the bachelor, what a bachelor degree costs, and you could say we only need that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that since you asked, I will say that I think way too many smart, hardworking young people go to college, blow a lot of money there, and blow a lot of time and opportunity there when they could be spending that somewhere else, right? I think it would be amazing if you took the amount of money. Think about the pressures we put on a young person today when they're 18 years old. Imagine if we did it with a pickup truck rather than college. We put in front of them this really expensive pickup truck. Let's say it's a $100,000 pickup truck, right? And tell them, if you get this pickup truck, you'll make $1 million in extra earnings over your lifetime. And they would obviously look at you and say, you're crazy. I can't afford a $100,000 pickup truck. That's stupid. But we do the same thing with something very, very similar. A lot of people go, they get the degree, they don't know why they're getting it, they don't know why they're there, and it doesn't actually help them build a definite path towards the life they want to create. It puts them in what I call an indefinite path, right? It's okay, yeah, it's supposed to help me get there, but I don't know how exactly, right? We want to help people build that definite path. And, you throw on all these other factors on top of it, like that the average college graduate in the United States is graduating with $35,000 in student loan debt. We wanted to make the program extremely affordable for people, so it's actually net tuition zero. You pay, all of the participants pay us in administrative fees. The business partners pay them back. So they either end up making money or not losing any while they do the program. And we really wanted to emphasize, again, like I said, going back to the Isaac story, all these entrepreneurs saying, yeah, we are hiring, we just can't find people with the skills and the experience. We want to give people those skills and the experience before they get too far along in their lives. So yeah, I mean, that's, since you asked, there is definitely a major problem with how we handle higher education in the United States today. And unfortunately, the way that a lot of that discussion goes is it gets politicized and people turn it into a discussion about whether we should subsidize it more. The reason why the college degree doesn't matter a lot today is because we subsidize it so much. Because there are a lot of colleges out there, a lot of them are like the for-profit colleges, but some of them aren't, where you pretty much just need a pulse to get in and get a degree, right? And that devalues the degree for everybody else. It's like basic supply and demand. If I'm an employer and I'm trying to tell candidates apart from each other, 30 years ago, having a degree would be a great signal to me that somebody's going to be a much better candidate. Today, let's just ignore the fact that the internet exists and I can actually look up candidates. But today, it's not a very powerful signal because I'm sure each of you know someone who shows up to class like totally hungover 3 days out of the week. That person's degrees is worth just as much as yours. So we did want to address that problem. Yes?
I feel like a lot of people get a degree not with like some master plan that they're going to go into a career, but just for like a foot in the door.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like the company you have going is a good foundation for that, but there's not many like that. So I think that's the reason why people go to school is just to try to.
Yeah, a lot of people.
If this was more readily available, people would go that route.
Yeah, a lot of people do go to school because they're told or they believe that I don't want to, assign agency or blame to any particular group, but they believe that the only way you get your foot in the door is a minimum you need to have that degree. What I have found through my work and through the work with all of our participants and our business partners is that that's not true. Part of what I do outside of my actual paid salaried job is I try to add to that discussion and tell people that's not true. The problem, there are a lot of reasons why people come to believe this, one of which is that a young person in the United States today when they're 18 years old has been totally removed from the marketplace for 18 years. They might have a job on the weekends, they might have a job in, say, a service field if they're lucky, but a decreasing number of young people even have jobs when they're in high schools, right? So the people who are telling them how to, plan the next couple years of their lives and go into a massive amount of debt before they're, 25 years old are also people who have been removed from the workforce for a very long period of time. Sometimes they're very well-intentioned parents or teachers who themselves haven't had to look for a job for a very long time. So no, I think you're absolutely right. I think a lot of people do go with that intention of getting their foot in the door. It's a really expensive and time-consuming way of doing that, and we're reacting to that gap in the marketplace. Yes.
What can we do on our own? If we don't
Good question.
for this, what can we go out and do?
Yeah. Going back to my story, if you do have the opportunity or the ability, and I understand not everybody has this, if you can find an interesting company, especially an early stage company, that you can just volunteer your time with, even if it's a couple hours per week, I really recommend that. What you're doing with that is you are building social capital. So it might be, you can call it an unpaid internship, you can call it volunteering, whatever you want to call it, but that person, if you do good work for them, that person will put their reputation and their network and their good name on the line for you. So that's one thing that I really, really recommend to young people. Urgent?
I just wanted to absolutely back up what you said. I have started 3 companies now, and I'm on my 3rd one. And the biggest challenge by far is finding somebody who actually wants to work in that industry and who actually wants to help build a business with you. So whenever I see college, I've been here now for my 3rd semester, the amount of value that professors, no offense professors, are giving versus the amount of value you get out of experience is completely lopsided. College is valuable to the point that you gain knowledge and learning, but it's not valuable whatsoever if you don't really and truly engage in it. And furthermore, again, if you have a degree and you can't express that knowledge, like he said, it doesn't matter. So whenever he says, go volunteer at a startup or with an entrepreneur, I can tell you if you support that entrepreneur and help them grow their company, the dividends will be vastly greater than anything you'll ever see from a college degree.
He said it better than I could. So that's the number one thing. I really recommend that. Yes.
So we get these opportunities because we're in school. We have access to the internships because we are seeking a degree, and a lot of the companies are
cold emailing. Cold emailing, I think, is actually really, really valuable. Find a company you're interested in. Use AngelList. Use LinkedIn.com. Use I don't know why I called it .com. Everyone knows what it is. Use LinkedIn. Use the fastest growing companies list, the Pittsburgh 100, the Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies list. Look at the interesting companies that you like. Find the person's email address who's in charge there. Email them. Tell them, I'm super excited about what you are doing. Don't send a stock email. People can tell when you're sending stock emails. And just be honest with them, right? I mean, that's how I find the companies we partner with. A lot of them are also partnered with universities, and they're excited about taking a Praxis participant who oftentimes is working in a greater capacity than the university interns are. Cold emailing is actually really, really useful. Also, looking at your own personal network that you may have, people really undervalue that. So the business partner that Nick Tucker, who I mentioned, is at, the company it holds hundreds of millions of dollars of assets, right? They hold oil wells, crane companies, a hotel, a construction company, all these other things, real estate development company. I met that guy because he was in the Lowe's that my mom works at when I went to go visit her when I was home from break one day. I just ran into him there and started talking to him. Look at the network that you yourself have. You'd be surprised. So, okay, one more question. Okay, great. I have some palm cards up here if anybody's interested in learning a little bit more about Praxis, and some books that I contributed a chapter or two about my own personal story. These are free as well if anyone's interested in those. So thank you, everyone.